Hey guys, quick question before we begin. Have you ever tried to go to bed early, like really early, and found yourself just lying there? Eyes wide open, ceiling fan squeaking like it knows your secrets, and suddenly you're thinking about that one awkward thing you did in third grade? Yeah, welcome to the club. But what if I told you that you might be sleeping wrong, or at least not like your ancestors did? Tonight on Zuzu's Time Travel, we're traveling not to a battlefield or a king's court or even a castle. Nope. We're going somewhere much quieter, much slower. We're slipping into the ordinary evenings of medieval folk. Peasants, monks, bakers, barmaids. We're watching what happens when the sun finally dips below the trees. So go ahead, dim the lights, wrap yourself in a blanket that smells faintly of lavender or last week's takeout, I won't judge, and let your mind drift into the medieval dark. Let's take it slow. And hey, if you love cozy history stories like this, hit the like button and drop a candle emoji in the comments to let me know you're still awake. Or not. Sleep is allowed here. All right, you ready? You feel that little yawn tickling your jaw already? Perfect. Let's begin. You wake up in a tiny stone cottage, just as the last light of the day fades. Outside the single window, more of a square hole with an oiled parchment stretched over it, you catch the purple haze of twilight melting into night. In medieval times, sunset didn't just mean evening, it was a signal, a cue. When the sun went down, so did everything else. People, noise, work, even the pace of thoughts seemed to dim. There were no electric bulbs, no phone screens, no TikToks keeping anyone up till 2 a.m., just fire, candlelight, torchlight, or the warm orange flicker of a hearth. The air outside smells like damp earth and chimney smoke. Inside, it's a strange mix of wet wool, garlic, and that one corner where something's been fermenting for way too long. You blink slowly in the gloom, your eyes adjusting not to darkness, but to stillness. And here's something weird. People liked the dark. It meant you could stop pretending to be useful. Nightfall was permission to pause, to sit by the fire, chew on dry bread, mumble through a prayer, and listen to the wind scrape the roof. And you weren't rushing. There was no urgency. Sleep was close, but not immediate. First, you settled. Quick question. What time is it right now? You probably just glanced at your screen or smartwatch. Easy. Done. But you? Back in that little cottage? You have no clocks. Zero. Not even a rooster handy. Instead, you listen. Maybe the abbey bell rings somewhere in the distance. Or you just notice how the shadows fall across the floor. You watch the firelight stretch and shrink. People in the Middle Ages felt time rather than measured it. There were hours, yes, but they were loosely defined by the church. Matins, compline, vespers, more sacred rhythm than TikTok. And bells? They weren't just to remind monks to pray. They told whole towns what was happening. The toll at compline meant wrap it up, folks. Time to wind down. Sometimes a town crier would shout updates in the street, and when things got really fancy, noble homes used candle clocks, candles marked with rings that burned down over time. Romantic, huh? Except when the wind blew the candle out, or the wax dripped too fast, or the rats ate it. So yeah, you told time by fire, bells, and gut feeling. A surprisingly calming way to live, really. Here's something kind of sweet. Before people fell into the first sleep, they had little rituals. Not big rituals like weddings or feast days, but small everyday things. The kind that only make sense when repeated. You might say a prayer, aloud or silently. Not the quick thanks for the day kind, but a murmured ritual you've whispered every night since childhood. Maybe you touch a wooden charm on the beam above your bed, or place garlic under your straw pillow to ward off. Well, who knows? Something. People believed the night was when spirits moved most freely. So you might sprinkle salt near the door, or lay your shoes pointing outward to confuse wandering souls. In noble homes, you might change into a night tunic, something softer, with fewer lice. You could warm the sheets with a hot stone wrapped in cloth, a kind of medieval heating pad. Even in poverty, people made gestures, a deep sigh, a shared glance, a muttered joke about the cold. All signs that yes, the day is over, it's safe to let go. Okay, you're finally lying down. The fire is a glowing mound of embers. You pull your blanket to your chin. It smells like sheep. But guess what? The night isn't silent. You hear your neighbor cough. You hear something thump in the attic. Maybe it's rats. Maybe not. Outside, dogs bark in the distance. Someone shouts, a drunkard maybe. Wind whistles between the boards. Night was alive, but none of it was scary. Not really. People expected noise. It was part of the landscape. You adjusted. You even found comfort in familiar creaks and huffs, just like we fall asleep today to fan hums or white noise apps. Also, animals were nearby. Chickens, pigs, even a cow. They might be right outside, or in the same room. You'd get used to the smells, or you wouldn't. Either way, sleep came. So as the darkness deepens, you lie there. The cold nibbles your nose. Your body starts to surrender. This is the beginning of the first sleep. Now here's the twist. That sleep you just drifted into, it wasn't all the sleep you'd get. Medieval folks didn't sleep straight through the night like we try to. Instead, they had two sleeps. First sleep lasted a few hours. Deep, heavy, deliciously restful. Then you'd wake up. Not in a panic, not in frustration. It was just part of the deal. This in-between period, called the watch, could last an hour or more. People might pray, tend to the fire, talk quietly, even make love. Some used the time to think, reflect, or just sit in the stillness. Then came the second sleep. A softer return to slumber, often until dawn. So next time you wake at 3 a.m., don't panic. You're just medieval now. Let's get this out of the way. Medieval pillows were not what you'd call plush. You know that one sofa cushion that's been sat on since 1997 and kind of smells like regret? Now remove the foam, add straw, and you've got the general idea. You shift under a scratchy wool blanket. The bed creaks beneath you. A rough wooden frame, some ropes, maybe a sack of chaff or hay. No memory foam here, but after a day of hauling firewood, mucking stalls, or kneading bread, you're too tired to complain. The firelight flickers like it's gossiping in the corner, and shadows stretch across the beams like sleepy cats. You scratch your leg. Yep, something bit you. Again. The first sleep didn't start with a bang. It crept in, one yawn, then another. Then that magical moment when your thoughts stop making sense. You dream of a goose with your cousin's face before slipping under. All right, let's talk sleeping arrangements. If you think privacy was a thing in medieval times, oh sweet summer child, entire families and sometimes guests, servants, or traveling strangers slept in the same room, often in the same bed. Yep, picture this. You, your spouse, your toddler who kicks like a mule, your uncle visiting from 2 villages over, and maybe a neighbor's kid whose house caught fire, all under one roof, all snoring, and people made it work. Bedtime was a social activity. You whispered stories, shared warmth, passed lice, unintentionally, and basically snuggled for survival. In inns, strangers shared beds without a second thought. No one asked about your Enneagram type first. Comment below if you'd survive a medieval sleepover. Spoiler, you probably wouldn't. Okay, here's a slightly darker truth. Not everyone made it to morning. Houses caught fire, hearths flared up, rats bit infants. People with respiratory issues had no rescue inhalers. And don't even ask what happened if someone had a nightmare and flailed into a lit candle. So even as you drifted into that heavy first sleep, someone might keep half an ear open, a parent listening for a sick child, a farmer alert to distant howling. That low-level dread was just part of life. You'd secure your door with a wooden latch, maybe place a bucket of water nearby, or sleep with a stick, just in case something or someone tried to come in. Sleep was sacred, but also occasionally mildly terrifying. Okay, pop quiz. What would you dream about if your day consisted of shoveling mud, carrying buckets of barley, and avoiding leprosy? Dreams in medieval times weren't just weird stories your brain made up. They were often seen as messages, divine, demonic, or deeply symbolic. People believed your soul wandered during sleep, sometimes into heaven, sometimes not. You might dream of a talking crow warning you about winter, or that your neighbor was a werewolf. Better safe than sorry. And yes, dream interpretation was a thing. Monks kept manuals for decoding them. Of course, sometimes a dream was just your brain saying, "Hey, remember that cheese you ate at midnight? That was a mistake." Here's the moment everyone forgets. You wake up, not at sunrise, just in the middle of the night. Not because of an alarm, no phone buzzing, you just stir, naturally, and it's peaceful. This was the watch, that mysterious in-between. You might poke the fire, check the animals, or just lie there, thinking. Some prayed, others, well, let's just say a lot of medieval babies were conceived between first and second sleep. There was no pressure to be productive, no panic that you couldn't sleep. And when you felt it, that second wave, you drifted back with the stars fading and the fire cooled. Comment if you have a weird 3 a.m. habit. No judgment here. You might just be accidentally medieval. All right, you know that awkward moment when you wake up at 2:37 a.m., stare at your ceiling, and seriously reconsider every life decision? Well, in medieval times, waking up in the middle of the night wasn't a crisis. It was the plan. Midnight wasn't the end of the day. It was more like halftime. After that first big block of sleep, people woke naturally for the watch. And what did they do? Oh boy. Some wandered outside to check on the animals. Others whispered secrets by candlelight, maybe even snuck in a snack. Because, let's be real, who hasn't hit the kitchen at 3 a.m.? And no, this wasn't weird. It was normal, routine. You were supposed to be awake for a bit. Some even wrote poetry, made plans, or had a quiet cry. Night is like that. Let's be honest, when was the last time you had a real conversation at 2 a.m.? In the medieval world, these nighttime wakeful hours became the most emotionally honest. Picture this, you and your partner whispering under the covers, sharing fears, hopes, jokes. Or maybe you're chatting with your sister in the loft above, while the fire gently crackles below. There's a calm intimacy to it, like the world is paused, and you're the only one still moving. This was prime time for storytelling, too. Oral tales about saints, spirits, or embarrassing neighbor mishaps, told in half-sleep voices. Comment if you have that one story someone always tells when everyone's too tired to stop them. Now, not everyone spent the quiet hours talking or checking livestock. Some people, especially monks, prayed, and not like a quick amen and back to bed. We're talking full-on chants, psalms, kneeling in cold chapels lit by flickering lanterns. Midnight was sacred. It felt closer to the divine. The world stilled, the air hushed, and prayers floated like smoke. Even regular folks sometimes used this time for quiet devotion. A whispered prayer by the hearth, a thumb brushed over a wooden cross, asking for mercy, for rain, for the chickens to finally lay eggs. Okay, let's spice things up a little. Not everyone used the midnight hour for prayer. Some folks had other plans. This was the time to sneak some leftover porridge, or maybe meet someone behind the barn for a little kissy face. You didn't have phones, but you did have unspoken signals, like a candle left in the window or a tap on the shutters. Some people even used this time to write, knit, or plan their week. Because no medieval planner app, right? Basically, this was the one time you were awake and not being told what to do. No one expected anything from you at midnight, so you got weird, and we love that for them. And then it hits. That wave. That fuzzy, cozy, bone-deep drowsiness. You've poked the fire, you've whispered your secrets, you've maybe eaten some slightly spoiled goat cheese. Now you lie down again. The straw creaks. The blanket settles over your shoulders. Your eyes flutter shut, and you surrender. The second sleep is deeper. Less dream, more rest. Your body knows what to do. You breathe slower. The candle burns lower. Outside, a rooster somewhere considers crowing, but it's too early. You're not thinking about tomorrow, or regrets, just warmth, just stillness. Comment below if you've ever fallen asleep on the second try and it felt better than the first. You ever hear a rooster crow before dawn and think, this bird is testing me? Yeah, same energy back then. In the medieval village, the return of the sun was less of a gentle nudge and more of a slap with cold air and noise. The rooster was your alarm clock, unskippable, unsnoozable, and absolutely smug about it. You stirred under scratchy wool, blinked into the pale morning, and heard it, clucking, barking, someone already chopping wood, maybe a cartwheel creaking. You'd smell smoke from a neighbor's chimney, the sharp tang of manure from the barn, maybe the lingering whiff of cabbage from last night's soup. Time to rise, time to face the damp floor with your bare feet. Again. First things first, you stretch, you groan, you scratch places that shouldn't itch. Then, you check the fire, always the fire. If it died during the night, you had to coax it back to life with flint and prayer. If it was still glowing, you added kindling and whispered, "Thank you, blessed embers." The fire was life. You couldn't cook, heat water, or survive the chill without it. And no, you couldn't just push a button. This was slow, smoky, eye-watering business. Meanwhile, your joints protested. The floor bit at your feet, and someone outside was already yelling about missing chickens. All right, no emails, no school run, but also no free time. You've got goats to milk, bread to knead, water to haul from the stream, because indoor plumbing was still somewhere in the fantasy genre. The entire household had a role. Even the smallest kids. You might be 6, but guess what? You're chasing chickens today. Clothes were stiff from the chill, fingers numb, but you moved through it. The rhythm of routine, slop for the pigs, sweep the hearth, skim yesterday's soup, and maybe, just maybe, sneak a leftover crust for breakfast. Comment below if your chores would have gotten you thrown in the stocks. As the light grew, so did the noise. Neighbors called from over fences, hooves clattered past, vendors shouted, "Fresh leeks, probably not moldy." People visited each other before the sun was too high. Why? Because the day ahead was long, and any conversation had to be squeezed between work, more work, and existential dread. A friend might stop in for cider and gossip, or to trade eggs for candles, or to ask, "Did your goat scream all night, too?" The village was awake, and you, whether ready or not, were in it. Let's not romanticize it. Medieval breakfast was tragic. If you were lucky, you got some stale bread, maybe a bit of curdled milk. If you were really lucky, leftover porridge, cold. Most folks didn't eat much in the morning. Too much to do. You worked first, ate later. Lunch was the real meal. And caffeine? Forget it. No lattes, no tea unless you were rich or religious. So yes, they started their 14-hour day with cold soup and vibes. You chewed, you moved on. That was survival. Let's just get this straight. Medieval people didn't sleep weird. We did, or rather do. The 2-sleep cycle wasn't a glitch. It was the original setting. First sleep, midnight wake, second sleep. That quiet break in the night wasn't some groggy accident. It was part of the plan. And it changed everything. Your dreams, your prayers, your late-night cravings for cold cabbage. The rhythm was baked into life, into candles, firewood, the flow of chores. Imagine organizing your day around naps you didn't even feel guilty about. We've lost that rhythm, not by choice, but by the tick of the clock and hum of electricity. So, what happened? Spoiler. It's not that medieval folks just randomly changed their minds one day and said, "Let's invent insomnia." Nope. The rhythm broke when artificial light invaded our lives. Street lamps, gas lights, then the big boss, electricity. Suddenly, people stayed up late and kept staying up. By the 18th and 19th centuries, this idea of one long sleep was taking hold. 2 sleeps? That sounded old-fashioned, even lazy. Work schedules tightened. Factories didn't care about your 2 a.m. journaling session. Capitalism was like, sleep less, produce more. So the two-sleep rhythm faded. Quietly, no funeral, just forgotten. Here's the kicker. Science only figured out recently what medieval folks already knew. Turns out, when you take people away from artificial light and give them fire, stars, and time, they naturally fall into a two-sleep pattern. First sleep, wake, second sleep. Boom. In sleep studies, folks plopped into natural environments, started waking up after a few hours, just like the medieval villagers. No alarms, no internet, just vibes. Even your circadian rhythm hints at this. There's a natural dip in alertness around midnight. It's almost like our bodies miss that middle-of-the-night tea and awkward confessions. Comment if your sleep is more chaotic than medieval goats. But here's the wild part. Some people are bringing the rhythm back. Modern homesteaders, off-grid folks. Even some sleep therapists are now suggesting polyphasic rhythms for better rest. And no, it's not just a fancy excuse to nap twice. They're recreating the medieval flow. First sleep, wake, journal, pray, breathe, stare at a candle. Second sleep. Not everyone can live like this, of course. Try telling your boss, "Sorry I missed the meeting, I was in my medieval watch." But for some, it's a way to reconnect to a quieter, softer pace of life. Maybe a more human one. All right, here's the big question. Could you do it? Could you surrender the phone, the binge watching, the glow of screens, and just sleep like a medieval villager? Wake softly at midnight, breathe into silence, write weird poetry, maybe whisper a prayer or kiss someone's forehead, then fall back into the second, deeper sleep. It's not easy, but it's tempting, isn't it? Maybe the two-sleep cycle wasn't just about rest. Maybe it was about giving your soul room to wander, to rest, reflect, return. Comment below if you'd try it for a night, or if you already do. No judgment. We see you, 3 a.m. Snackers. Picture this. The blacksmith, big burly guy named Hob, snoring so loud his windows rattle. Meanwhile, his rooster, dubbed Sir Feathers, decides 2 a.m. is the perfect time to crow at absolutely nothing. Why? Because it's always the right time for drama. But Hob doesn't panic. He just opens one eye, mumbles something about stew, and rolls over. It's the middle of the night. He's in the sweet spot between his first and second sleep. Even the rooster knows this. He struts back into the coop like nothing happened. Classic Sir Feathers. The whole village has its rhythm, and Hob is the heartbeat. He works when it's hot, rests when it's dark, and wakes when his body says so, not when a clock tells him. Here's something nobody tells you. Gossip travels faster in the dark. Between first and second sleep, villagers like Greta and Old Nan would sit by the fire whispering about who's stealing eggs or whose cow looked suspiciously well-fed. No internet, no tabloids, just candle gossip and the occasional, "Did you hear about Edith's missing socks?" These conversations were soft, half-laughed, sometimes serious, sometimes scandalous, but always cozy, always wrapped in the crackle of the hearth and the scratch of wool against skin. Comment if your family also turns into amateur detectives after 11 p.m. Ah yes, the nightly soundscape, frogs, creaking shutters, and snoring. Loud, proud, nasal harmony from every cottage wall to the chapel. Some villagers were known by their snore. "Oh, that's Edgar. Sounds like a goat choking on bagpipes." Others, dead silent. Creepy, honestly, but nobody wore earplugs. You just accepted it. You slept through it. You got up, went outside, stretched under the moonlight, then went back to bed. It was normal, oddly peaceful. Okay, but here's the wild bit. Animals, also on a two-sleep vibe. Dogs napped during first sleep, wandered around during the night, then curled back up during second sleep. Cats? Oh, medieval cats were chaos, knocked over things, stared into dark corners like they saw ghosts, probably did. Even livestock stirred. Chickens fluffed their feathers. Cows shifted in their stalls. The village breathed through the night. Your midnight wake wasn't lonely. It was communal. You weren't the only soul stirring. There was a rhythm bigger than you. Then came that moment, the sky turning pink, birds losing their minds, and smoke beginning to curl from chimneys. One by one, cottages stirred. The second sleepers rose slowly, stretch, yawn, back into life. Buckets clanked, hooves thudded, water spilled, but beneath it all, a secret rhythm beat. They had slept twice, woken gently, whispered in firelight, laughed quietly, and now they faced the day not with a rush, but with flow. Could you do it? Sleep in shifts, gossip at midnight, and let your rooster handle the timekeeping? Comment below if your neighborhood rooster also thinks it's a DJ. You ever stubbed your toe on a bedpost in the dark and thought, man, I was born in the wrong era? Well, medieval folks didn't have nightlights, but they did have something better. Beeswax candles, rush lights, and soot-stained oil lamps. The moment first sleep ended, someone in the house would shuffle out of bed, mutter something about cold toes, and light the candle. That flame? Tiny, but mighty. It cast shadows that danced like gossiping spirits and made every object look slightly haunted. The smell? A mix of warm wax, smoke, and old wood. Cozy, but slightly singed. Kinda like burnt toast if toast was made out of farm chores and ash. You'd sit beside the candle, squinting into the flame like it was telling you secrets. And in a way it was. Medieval folks weren't always illiterate bumpkins. Some were downright scribblers. During the night interlude, parchment came out. Notebooks, ledgers, letters. Clerics might copy texts or draft complaints about that one monk who chews too loud. Merchants balanced the day's accounts by candlelight. And if you were lucky enough to know how to write a love note, you were basically a heartthrob with ink stains. Imagine trying to concentrate while a candle flickers, chickens stir, and your spouse mutters in their sleep. Romantic and chaotic. Comment below if you've ever written your best ideas when everyone else was asleep. Some nights, nobody wrote anything. Instead, you talked. Not small talk, deep talk. The kind you only have when the world is asleep. You'd sit with your sister and whisper about your childhood goat, or your neighbor's strange hat, or what dreams meant, or whether time was a wheel or a line or a wagon with a broken axle. There's something magic about talking by candlelight. Your voice lowers, your words stretch. Everything feels more important, even if it's just about turnips. Not every night interlude had to mean something. Sometimes people just sat, listened, felt the floor beneath them, the wool on their legs, the sound of wind outside, and the occasional snore or mouse scuffle. Doing nothing was a thing, and honestly, they were good at it. Today we'd panic, grab our phones, scroll, distract. But in that slow, candlelit pause, they simply were. Awake, but still resting. Alert, but still dreaming. Comment below if you'd try a night like that. No tech, just wool and wind. Eventually, the candle runs low. You watch the wick sink, the light dim, the shadows lean longer, and slowly you crawl back to bed, warm from the inside out. You've said what needed to be said, thought what needed to be thought, felt what needed to be felt. Second sleep begins, not rushed, not anxious, just natural. And the candle, it sputters out like a sigh. Sleep well, traveler. Your second slumber awaits. You ever dream of your teeth falling out? In medieval times, they didn't dream that. No, they dreamed of demons sitting on their chest. Literally. They called it night pressing. And folks believed dreams could be physical. Like you wake up mid-sleep and bam, there's a goblin crushing your ribs. Was it sleep paralysis? Probably, but to them, just a typical Tuesday night. You might see a lost goat, or float over your old field, or get chased by a pig with a bishop's hat. Don't ask. Dreams were weird. Still are. And here's the kicker. People took dreams seriously. You didn't just shrug and sip coffee. You told your neighbor. You asked the priest. You rewrote your life based on a dream about falling in a ditch. Yup, there were people whose job it was to explain your weird medieval dreams. You dreamed about drowning? Clearly, you're full of secrets. A sheep gave you a lecture in Latin? That's just your guilt talking. You saw bread floating in the river? Oh, that's definitely about your mother-in-law. These dream interpreters weren't therapists, more like gossip wizards with serious opinions. And sometimes, their advice actually affected real decisions, like marriage or planting crops. Imagine someone today saying, "I canceled my wedding because a man with a cabbage head waved at me in a dream." Welcome to 1382. Dreams weren't private in those days. You shared them, like bread or gossip or fleas. You'd wake after first sleep, roll over and whisper, "You'll never guess what I dreamed." And suddenly, it's a whole conversation. Even kids shared their dreams, which usually involved way too many chickens or being taller than the priest. Families slept close, remember? Dreams echoed through the room. One person talked in their sleep, another asked questions like it was a podcast. There were no dream journals, just human memory, and pillow talk under scratchy wool. Had a bad dream? Time for an onion under your bed? Or maybe drink a mug of hot barley water and walk backward through your doorway? Medieval folks had solutions for nightmares. You could wear a dried toad in a pouch, yes, really, or sleep with a knife under your pillow, just in case the dream world got ideas. There were prayers, herbal teas, ritual foot rubs. Okay, that last one was mostly improvised. Dreams mattered, and people took them seriously. You didn't just shake it off, you treated it. Comment below if you'd try a toad charm to ward off bad vibes. And then, the dream fades. The candles burned low, your body's heavy again. You roll back into your scratchy sheets, breathing slow. The house quiets. Second sleep isn't just a nap, it's a descent, like slowly sinking into moss. Dreams may still come, but gentler now. Less goblin on your chest, and more, you're baking bread with a friendly fox. You've told your tale, you've had your remedies, now your body takes you back, into rest, into rhythm, into dreamless calm. Okay, real talk. Have you ever been lying awake at night and heard a weird hooting sound, and your brain immediately goes, "Yep, ghost"? Medieval folks had no chill about owls. To them, an owl calling outside your house wasn't just a bird checking in, it was an omen, a warning, a whisper from the beyond. The owl's call was eerie, like wind through a cracked skull. Woo! And in the dead of night, when everything else was quiet, that who hit different. People believed owls could steal souls, spy for witches, or bring sickness. And yet they were also useful. Owls ate mice, mice ate grain, ergo owls were weird ghostly angels with feathers. It's complicated. While most folks dozed between sleeps, one person stayed very much awake, the town watchman. He was like your cranky neighbor mixed with a security guard, except instead of a flashlight, he had a lantern and a very loud bell. His job? Walk the streets, announce the hour, warn if fire broke out or thieves were snooping, and occasionally shout, "All's well," even when his feet were frozen and his nose was running. The scent of cold stone, the sound of his boots on the cobbles, the flicker of lantern flame on puddles. That was the soundtrack of second sleep. Comment if you'd trade your desk job for one night of medieval bell walking. Let's not pretend second sleep was always peaceful. Sometimes things got weird. A drunken neighbor hollering about stolen pies, a pack of dogs chasing a terrified chicken, or the wind slamming open a door like it owed you rent. People were scared of more than burglars. They feared spirits, curses, and worst of all, unattended fires. Thatched roofs, plus fire, medieval nightmare. So every sound in the night, a mystery, every thump, suspicious, every creak, a ghost. Probably, maybe. Not everyone stayed in bed between sleeps. Some folks snuck out, to check on animals, to whisper sweet nothings, or to sneak a bite of bread without waking Granny. Midnight errands were hushed and slippered. You tiptoe across creaky floors, pray the dog doesn't bark, and reach that fresh cheese chunk like it's a holy relic. This was peak stealth, Peak snack heist, peak forbidden fun. Eventually, the street grew quiet. Even the owl gave it a rest. The watchman rang one last bell. The wind settled, and behind shuttered windows, households drifted into that second, syrup-thick sleep. But in the east, the sky began its whisper. A gray smear, then a pale stripe, then the faintest blush, and with it, the dreams faded. The quiet deepened. The world held its breath. Morning was coming. Right. Let's talk about the real rulers of the medieval night, mice. While you're peacefully snoozing under your scratchy wool blanket, there's a whole secret rodent rave happening just inches away. Mice scrambling across beams, chewing through bread sacks, hosting full-blown cheese banquets in your pantry. It's a mouse nightclub up there, and these mice, elite burglars, tiny, nimble, no respect for human property. You know how people now worry about iPhone chargers disappearing? Back then, it was your hard-earned oatcake crumbling in some mouse party under the floorboards. Also, cheese traps didn't work. Mice got wise. So medieval folks tried everything: cats, mint leaves, clanging pots. Results? Questionable. Let's give it up for medieval cats, the only ones who actually worked the night shift. Your tabby wasn't just for cuddles. It was security. It was pest control. It was judge, jury, and executioner of every squeaky invader. You'd hear a thump, a squeak, and then silence. Justice served. Cats were honored members of the household, fed bits of leftover stew, sometimes even named after saints, Saint Meowth of the fireplace. But they weren't all fluff. Some were downright feral. Battle-scarred, one-eyed legends who prowled barns like furry knights. Did they nap between hunts? Of course, but only after they'd reclaimed your pantry. Some of the mischief didn't come with fur. It came with tiny feet and sticky fingers. Kids would wake up between first and second sleep, stomachs grumbling, and what better solution than sneaking off for a forbidden honey treat, or a heel of bread, or, if they were feeling daring, leftover meat. You'd hear little feet tiptoeing across cold floors, then the muffled crunch of success. The danger wasn't being caught by a parent, it was waking Granny. Granny had bat hearing and zero mercy. Many a medieval child learned stealth the hard way. Sometimes, mischief was verbal. Two neighbors whispering over the garden wall in the pitch black, sharing the day's best gossip because the rest of the village was asleep. Or friends who couldn't sleep, murmuring across straw mats about who's marrying who, whose cow is acting weird, or who stole whose spoon. Gossip under the stars was a thing. Words softened by the dark, secrets carried by cool air, no judgment, just whispers and a little laughter. Some of the best medieval friendships, formed between first and second sleep with a blanket pulled over two heads. Not every midnight mischief maker was innocent. Some folks, just rebels, like the baker's apprentice sneaking off to meet someone they weren't supposed to, or the farmer's son daring to swim in the pond at midnight to test the stars. These were quiet acts of defiance, not big enough to shake the world, but bold enough to stir a sleepy village. A goat would bleat, a door creaked, someone mumbled, "Kids these days," in their sleep, and by dawn, all was forgotten. The village stretched, yawned, and started fresh. But in the quiet shadows of the night, mischief ruled. Every medieval home had one, that cursed board that betrayed your every midnight move. Imagine it. You're just trying to sneak quietly to the chamber pot or back from stealing a snack and then creak. Not just any creak, the loudest, most obnoxious, grudging groan you've ever heard. Like the house itself is tattling on you. You freeze, one toe midair, heart pounding, listening for footsteps. And guess what? Someone coughs in the next room. You've been made. Those floorboards were the OG snitch, worse than a nosy neighbor. Medieval parents didn't need baby monitors. They had the board. Now, this one's weird. Chimneys weren't just for smoke. They were unintentional gossip tubes. In smaller homes, the chimney flue from one house might connect to another or run right through shared walls. So, at night, when things were quiet, You could sometimes hear your neighbors through it, soft murmurs, a burst of laughter, or, more often, snoring. Imagine trying to fall asleep only to hear Old Man Corbin's phlegmy snorts echoing from your fireplace. It was like the medieval version of thin apartment walls, only sooty. Picture this. You're lying in bed, staring up into the wooden ceiling beams, and something flutters. It's not your imagination, it's a bat, or maybe two, just casually flapping around above your bed like it owns the place. These little guys didn't mean harm, they were just passing through. But the sound, like leather gloves slapping together in the dark, could rattle your soul. Some folks even believed bats were spirits. Others just threw boots at the ceiling. Either way, you weren't getting back to sleep soon. Okay. Everyone knows the drip. You don't see it. You only hear it. A slow, steady drip from somewhere in the house. A ceiling corner, a bucket, maybe the wash basin. But it's dark. And you're warm. And you really, really don't want to get out of bed. So you lie there, listening, counting, wondering if it's a leak, or worse, a rat taking a bath. It's the soundtrack of medieval insomnia. And then, the blood-curdling scream, sometimes far away, sometimes oddly close, always unexplained. Maybe it's an animal, maybe a drunken neighbor, maybe a fox with drama, but that one chilling noise would jolt everyone upright, clutching their sheets. The best part? No one ever investigated. They just muttered, "Not my problem," and tried to fall back asleep. Classic medieval mindset. If it didn't knock on your door, it wasn't your business. Before the sun even dares to rise, there it is, that ridiculous throat-shredding that slices the silence like a saw through frozen bread. Roosters, man, tiny birds with the confidence of a medieval king, and they didn't just crow once. Oh no. They'd do it every few minutes just in case you didn't hear them the first 17 times. If you were still nestled under your straw-stuffed bedding, you'd try to ignore it. But there was no escaping it. The rooster was the medieval alarm clock. Unwanted, unstoppable, unsnoozable. There's a special kind of betrayal that comes with stepping out of a warm bed onto a cold stone or wood floor. Especially barefoot. You flinch, you hiss, you consider crawling back under the covers and pretending it's still midnight. But no, chores wait for no one. You shuffle, groggy and grumbling, toward the fire that somehow always went out despite being stoked the night before. Time to relight it, with numb fingers and sleepy curses. Medieval mornings weren't Instagram-worthy. They were survival mode, especially if your home had no windows or insulation, which, let's face it, was most of them. Unlike today, where alarms are private and snoozed 7 times, the medieval morning wake-up was a group activity. The cows mooed, the pigs squealed, babies cried, the baker's cart rattled down the cobblestone, and somewhere, someone was already yelling at their goat. Sleep wasn't something you eased out of, it was shoved out of you by the noise parade of rural life. And if you lived above your workshop or shared a house with 3 generations, forget quiet. You'd have a toddler tugging your ear before your eyes even opened. Ah, the medieval morning stretch. You reach your arms up, your back cracks, you yawn so wide a mouse could move in, and then comes the scratching. Yep, fleas, lice, and whatever else had decided to move in during the night. Bathing wasn't a daily ritual, it wasn't even weekly for some, so scratching was just part of the routine, like brushing your teeth, but more desperate. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and everyone was doing it. Even the nobility had scratching sticks carved from bone. You'd think after all that noise, cold, and scratching, you'd be rewarded with a hearty breakfast. Think again. Most folks had something humble. A chunk of stale bread softened with ale or milk, maybe some porridge if you were lucky, cheese if you had a cow, honey if the bees cooperated, no bacon, no eggs, definitely no waffles. But hey, you ate while standing, tossing crumbs to the chickens underfoot. And somehow that bite of rough bread felt like fuel, because after all that night waking, sleep cycles, and mystery screams, you had a long day ahead. So, there you have it. A journey through a world that slept in rhythms we've long since buried beneath electric lights and digital clocks. A world where silence had shape, darkness had depth, and sleep came not in a single dose, but in two gentle waves. Kind of makes you want to turn off your Wi-Fi, doesn't it? Modern life pushes us to power through, to compress, to hustle. But maybe, just maybe, we've lost something along the way. Something slower, softer, more human. So next time you wake up in the middle of the night, don't panic. Maybe you're not broken, maybe your brain just remembers. Thanks for wandering through the shadows and snores of the past with me. This has been Zuzu's Time Travel, and if this story tucked you into a better night's rest or sparked some sleepy thoughts, leave a little zzz in the comments, or let us know your weirdest midnight snack. Until next time, stay curious and sleep well.